a bar on top. It should show you recording. In close, thank you for participating in the 2022 Partnerships in Action Annual Conference. Now I will introduce the presenter. Please welcome Scott Cameron, Michelle Colburn, and Annette Westfall. Will be your presenters today. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Eric. Um, so we're going to be a little flexible with this program today. We're going to go through the introductions, and I know Annette had another appointment. She'll be joining us here shortly. So we want to encourage questions and comments. You can either raise your hand, we'll catch that, or you can put it in the chat, your questions. We'll do as best we can to field it. So the first thing we'll do with our introductions, myself, I'm Scott Cameron. I'm the Midwest Region's Budget Officer. You can see my email address and my cell phone number. Feel free to call with budget questions anytime you want. I'm more than willing to help out. Email obviously is the best. I've been at the Midwest region for quite some time. I started out in the roads department, about 18 years there. Then I went as the admin officer for Great Lakes Agency, and then I took the opportunity to be the Midwest region's budget officer. And it's been interesting and a lot of challenges, but it's been a great time too. So I've been working with budget for about 10 years now as the admin officer and budget officer specifically. So then Michelle, if you could do your introduction, please.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Corbine. I'm Self-Determination Officer and Awarding Official at the Midwest Region. I work with the tribes in preparation and the award and administration of the Public Law 93-638 contracts. So if you have questions regarding your tribal budgets under a contract, you would contact me or your awarding official, Jody Zorden. If you have questions regarding like the BIA budget and the budget process formulation, some of the data calls that may come up regarding like CTGP breakout, the pay cost, things of that are related to the BIA budget, and that's when you would contact Scott Cameron. But anything contract related, be sure to contact your respective awarding official. And like Scott mentioned, Annette is also going to be on the panel discussion today. So we have some information to provide, and then basically will be, question and answer. We're hopeful that's how this session will go. Annette, I don't have all of her bio, but I have worked with her for many years. And she's the tribal administrator at the Menominee Indian Tribe. She is our main point of contact and has regarding our contracts, modifications, budgets, things like that. So she'll be able to provide a good and different, unique tribal perspective to some of the questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And so budget 201, at the end of the PIA sessions, there's always a critique of the sessions. And last year when I did the budget 101 training, that's one of the critiques we had. We actually do read these and take a look at them. And they wanted a 201, and kind of basically when the money hits the tribe, or some questions that we'll be covering in a second here, they wanted a little more in depth in the budget, some of the best practices, carryover requests. So that's what this is about. It's funding, once it comes out of my hands, what can you do with it, or some ideas that might help you. So it is an open dialogue. We do want questions toward the end after we present the information, and we'll go from there. So some of the topics that we're going to cover, if a tribe currently doesn't have a BIA program, what can they do to request it? You need to change your budgets mid-year. The budget mod process, what's it entail? If there's money left over at the end of the term, how do you carry over requests? Timelines and deadlines for budget mods, carryover requests, etc. Some best practices in managing our BA budgets, and common pitfalls. And that's what we want to cover down, and we want to make sure everybody's successful as possible. And it just changed slides by itself. End of year one-time funding request, and then just basically going to touch on the 105 leases. It's not just for Indian Health Services. And I just wanted to provide you the resource so you can reach out and do it. And I'll explain why it's such a good idea for the tribes to look into. But we're not limited to these topics. This is an open forum between Michelle, myself, and Net. I think we should be able to provide. If we can't provide an answer, we'll jog it down. I got a big old notepad sitting right next to me. We'll capture the information, get back to you. So the first three topics: how can a tribe request funding for the BIA program if they don't currently have an allocation for it? And what if we need a change to our budgets mid-year? Does the budget mod process entail? And what if we have money left over at the end of the term, and how do we carry over requests work? Michelle?
Okay. How can tribes request funding for a program if they don't currently have an allocation? That kind of goes into the BIA budget process, and you would work with Scott, and when they do the budget formulation, the tribe could submit a request at that time. The other option is for the tribe's TPA base funding, that out of that allocation, the total base funding, the tribe would move and reallocate funds from one program to another program. So it's not an overall increase, but you're able to move the funding, and you're able to operate and use the funds to operate a new program.
And that kind of goes true with self-governance too. You put the request. I always consider it like the amount of money that's provided is a big pie. It's how you slice it up into the programs you need. When it comes into self-governance, it's very similar, the same situation. You determine which programs you want to run, but it comes out of that slice of pie that you already have existing.
And then the second question, what do we need to do if I change our budgets mid-year, and what does the budget mod process entail? And that specifically we'll get into a few slides down here. And that third question you have, what if we have any money left over at the end of the term? How do carryover requests work? Under self-determination contracts, the law specifically states that the funds are available until expended. The tribe does not have to submit a carryover request. So this, again, 638 differs from, your traditional grants that you have with other funding agencies. So as long as your purpose and your budget is not changing, you may just have experienced some delays, or delays related to staffing and haven't gotten the project or program started. But if you're going to continue to operate in the manner as the contract was awarded, and as long as the contract term has not expired, there's no other requests that the tribe would need to submit. So you can just carry on and conduct the activities and expend the funds as indicated in the contract. The caveat being is if the term is expired or expiring and you still have funds, at that time you would need to request a modification to extend the period of contract period of performance. So, like I had mentioned earlier, this budget session, and Scott had stated as well, was set up due to questions that had arisen as a result from the budget 101. So and all the questions, once read through them, were self-determination contract related. So it may not necessarily be, I don't want to consider like a budget 201, but more so budgets and how it relates to self-determination contracts. So our budget's under the Indian Self-Determination Act. You know, the budget is included in your contract award and in your, let's back up, even in your contract proposal, you're required to provide, you know, a line item budget and a justification. Once that proposal is approved, then in your contract document itself, it includes that approved budget. So your travel budget includes your specific line items, your salaries, your wages, fringe, travel, supplies, equipment, anything of that nature. And that correlates back to your tribal accounting and how those expenses are, you know, their chart of accounts and how those expenses are allocated in the tribal finance system. Sometimes we receive program budgets that aren't indicated and specified by the line item budgets, but more like a project. In those cases, we would go back and request additional information from the tribe, again, to have the specific line item. Okay, next slide. So the budget itself is included as an attachment. And I thought it might be helpful for tribal staff. We always have, after the initial contract award document, the SF-26 or the SF-30, the modification, we have, it's called an attachment A, and it's an attachment to those award documents, which has a summary of the financial information. Excuse me?
They're still trying to download still?
Yeah,
Okay, somebody's mic is on.
yes.
Sandra
Yes,
McCook.
It is me.
Got it.
Okay, so we have this financial summary. It's useful for BIA staff, the awarding officials, the self-determination staff, as well as our awarding officials, technical representatives, our program staff. And helpful for tribal staff as well. It gives a summary recap of the funds that were provided, under which contract, if it was the original award, or which modification the funds were provided. So it has the accounting and appropriation data, and you should be used to seeing it, you know, the various line items and the numbers here. And each one of these numbers that goes into the Bureau's financial system, and each has a different meaning and purpose. So I thought maybe it would be helpful for the tribes to understand what this, what all these number sequences mean. So that's typically how you see it. So we'll go back through and line 010, line 1, line 10, we'll break that down. Okay. So here's a breakout of the accounting information. And 010 is just a sequential line item. And we go by tens. When we first transferred over to our new accounting system, it did not go by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We had to go by tens. And that was to, for the interface with Treasury's ASAP system, where you draw the funds down. That has since changed. However, we have continued to remain with using sequential numbers by the tens. So that's just the indication, like I said, of our line item numbering. The next set of digits is the fund information. So there's 10 digits there, and each one of those numbers has a different meaning and code. The first two are the beginning of the budget fiscal year. So what fiscal year are we in? The number 3 there is the last budget. So in this instance, the beginning that we can start to obligate and use the funds is beginning in fiscal year 22. And the last fiscal year that we can obligate the funds is fiscal year 23. The next digit is A and that's for the Bureau. And for us, that's DOI, Bureau of Indian Affairs. The next set is four digits, and that's the Treasury main account, 2100. And then the final 2 digits is the appropriation indicator, and DD is appropriated for direct program funds. So this tells us with that set of numbers there, this is a 2-year operation of an Indian program. And the funds are provided directly to the tribe. Next slide. The next sequence is the program and functional area. So if you're operating, in this case, it's T190-3030, that indicates it's a consolidated tribal government program. If it was T93-7070, that is a contract support. So every single program has a different unique codes there. And that tells us which program that relates to. The next set of sequence of numbers indicates the funds. And so we're AA is our Indian Affairs again. The next 2 digits indicate which region is obligating the funds. FF stands for Midwest region. Typically under your tribal funds there, you'll see a 50, 51, 55, 60, and that just indicates then which area you're under. The 55 would be under Great Lakes, so the Great Lakes tribes would fall under that, and 60 would be the Michigan Agency tribes. Then the next 3 digits is the unique tribal indicator, and every tribe has a unique code. So I had listed, this one says 483, and that is Little Traverse Bay. So I have a few others there, 440, Menominee, 430, Bad River, 480, Bay Mills, just for examples to show that each tribe has their unique code. And then T is an indicator of, that's a tribal designation. So that tells us this code references a tribe. And the final sequence of number is our budget object class. And it's just how funds are obligated and for what purpose on the BIA side. And T252I00 refers to only self-determination contracts. So if anybody is ever looking on our side and trying to see, well, what are these funds used for, or under what type of agreement, as soon as they would see that budget object class, they would be able to tell that this is a self-determination contract. So that provides some additional information, regarding the budget information on the BIA side.
Is there any questions out there yet?
Nothing yet.
So it's a lot of time those numbers, when you first get into budget, you look at it, it's like, oh my God, this big number. Well, that breaks it down to make it more understandable. So the next questions, are there timelines or deadlines required for budget mod carryover requests?
There's no specific timelines and deadlines. However, there's things that you need to take into consideration. Once a request is submitted, just be aware, that the BIA has 90 days to review and approve an award. So if you're thinking that you need a revised budget and you're changing, the budget from one line item to another and you're needing it in a hurry, I guess I would plan on that as try to submit as soon as possible. Because typically we are first in, first out. So it may not get, depending on who's it's assigned to and what the current workload is, it may not be processed within a day or so. Again, just to be sure to submit your budget request prior to acting on it and expending funds under your revised proposed budget. And then also be mindful, of year-end processing. Right now, we're in the midst of that. So we have a lot of funds coming through. We have a lot of contract actions. So things may take a little bit longer. And one other item to be mindful of is that your internal tribal signatory process. We may get the modification prepared and returned back to the tribe, but sometimes that internal process on the tribal side takes an extended period for whatever reason that may be. Maybe it goes through a series of reviews on your side. Maybe sometimes the tribe's legal department is reviewing it, and then it goes back through another signature process. So take all of that into consideration when you're determining the question, what are the specific timelines.
Michelle, do you want me to run ahead on these slides? Because they kind of cover that first question. Do you want me to?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, let's go back one slide there.
Oh, sorry.
And in your contract document, under the attachment to your annual funding agreement, Section B does cover budget modifications. Again, stating that your request should be submitted prior to the revision and, before it's accepted or acted upon. But definitely budget revisions are required when there's a change from the scope or the objective of the contract. If initially you were going to submit and the budget included, sometimes this happens, one line item saying that we were going to use the funds to purchase equipment. And then perhaps the tribe has trouble funds or the equipment is no longer needed, whatever the case may be. If now you're going to use the funds for salary, that's a change in scope where you would need to submit that budget request and have a contract modification process. If the request requires additional funding, again, because we need that to be added. First of all, see if there's funding available. And secondly, if there is, that's the mechanism, a contract modification to provide the funding to the tribe. C, if the revision causes a change in the amount of the indirect cost. So if the example I used, changing from equipment to salaries or vice versa, that changes the indirect cost need, then a modification is required. And it could be changing the need up or down the increase of indirect costs or contract support, or the indirect costs and the direct contract support costs for the increase or decrease. So in either instance, a budget modification would be required. D, the revision pertains to additional items requiring approval. In most cases, that would be equipment or anything out of the ordinary. Okay, next slide. And then submitting a budget revision. You would submit your written request to your respective awarding official. And that is, again, because the contract is already awarded. So pre-award goes to your agency superintendent, your regional director, that are the approving officials. But once a contract is awarded, the administration and of that contract and further, contract modifications are under the purview of the awarding official. So you do the request by submitting a cover letter indicating what that change may be. It's best practice if it's on tribal letterhead, and definitely signed by the tribal leader or your authorized signatory. Oftentimes we'll receive requests directly from the program personnel. But again, remembering that these are government to government contracts, and who is the authorized representative for each party. For the government, it is the awarding official, and for the tribal government, it is your, tribal leader, your president, chief, tribal chairman, or the authorized designee. In most cases, that authority hasn't, been delegated down to a program level. Identify your contract number and the program or project, especially in the cases where there's multiples included in one contract. Your reason for the revision, and then your proposed revised budget. And it's important to when you're providing that revised budget, to give us a clear picture. For example, if you were awarded $10,000 and to say, here was the original budget, here's what our changes are, and here's the revised budget, proposed revised budget. We have received sometimes, if it's mid-year, end of the year, and budgets are just provided for, $3,000. Without having some of that background, I mean, we can certainly go look, but we don't know where the expenditures have taken place. And based off the SF 425, I mean, that doesn't give us the detailed and line item information. So we need to have that clear snapshot and picture of where those changes and revisions are being made. Again, it's important to note that the revision is not effective until the contract modification is fully executed, meaning it's signed by both parties. All costs must be reasonable, allowable, and allocable, just as with your original proposed budget. If you have questions regarding what's allowable, what's not allowable, it's a good reference is, 25 CFR 200, the Omni Circular, and that goes through allowability of costs. Okay.
And what are some best practices for managing your BIA budget?
I would say from my perspective, to keep a handle on it, to keep track of where things are at, where you are, in relation to your proposed budget. Is that how your actual expenditures are looking to be, and knowing if a modification would be required, and submitting those budget revisions timely.
And I would assume a good accounting for where the expenses are.
Definitely.
And what are some common pitfalls that you've seen over the years, budget problems to help us avoid in the future?
I would say not requesting a modification timely, or that the modification doesn't match or your actual expenditures don't necessarily match up with what was proposed. That can be an issue for indirect costs, contract support costs. It could be an issue for when program monitoring is conducted. And that could also become an issue when the tribe single audit, because things aren't reconciling there. So requesting that budget modification, and again, it truly is an accounting of where you are, what was proposed, how are things actual expenditures looking. Another pitfall at times is delays and having a large carryover of funds for an extended period, not expending the funds, delays the closeout of the contract, completion of the project or activity, or even providing services. But as well as, if the funds were awarded to the tribe 3 years ago and you're now starting to expend it, the administrative portion of it on the tribal side relating to your indirect cost rate has changed, most likely. So you may be over or underfunded. So that is a common issue that we're experiencing.
And when they drag out over the years too, there's, if there's changeover in leadership and people managing it, that can be a huge problem too, I've seen. The longer they
Definitely.
drag out. Boy, Annette I haven't seen her pop on yet. So we're just gonna keep rolling a little bit here. So end of year funding requests. I wanted to touch base on this one a little bit. A letter went out, I believe it was February 2nd of this last year, for end of year funding requests. We did receive quite a few this year, which is amazing. I greatly appreciate that. What the region does, and you can send them to your agency superintendent, then they log them. As long as it comes from tribal leadership, because we want to stay in the truest form of government to government. So those requests come in either through the agency or through programs. Then we log them and categorize them. And if it's at the agency level and the agency doesn't have the funding for it, then they send it up to the regional counterpart and see if they have funding at that level. And if there's no funding at that level, then they send them up to center office to their counterpart to see if there's any carryover funds, which carryover funds generally are, if we couldn't fill a vacancy, a position, we have that salary savings. With the salary, we'd have travel, training, all that compiles. And when you look at it nationally, there's some money to be had there. I got a request from central office the other day for 3 different disciplines, and we requested it all. And it was based on those regions that had the lowest amount of carryover and who requested the funding. As of last night, we were the only region that requested this additional money. So that'll go into these end of year one-time funding requests for projects tribes submit. So that's a good thing. We not only use any funding and salary savings we have, we also utilize as much as we can from other offices up to central office. So I encourage you to put those in. I know there's a deadline, I believe the letter said in August. I've got 2 in yesterday. So they'll be logged and categorized, and then we try to prioritize and fund those that we can, based on the discipline where the funding's available. Something I wanted to touch base on, I'm not the resident expert for 105 leases, but I talked to a couple tribal leaders the other day, and I says, the 105 lease program's been around for a few years now. I said, why haven't you looked into it previous? And they said, well, because it's for IHS. We do it with our Indian Health Services facilities. Well, it's not just for IHS. So if you have a BI program that's run out of a facility, you can enter the 105 lease program that'll provide funding for that facility. I think it's an excellent opportunities for the tribes in Midwest region. I think I would love to see every tribe in the region get into the 105 lease program. It's funding for their facilities to run the programs that they currently don't have. And it does not come out of our BI budget. So remember when I mentioned early on, when you change programs, I consider it like a pie. You'd have to take from one program to add another program. Well, this isn't part of our pie. That comes out of DOI direct. So it doesn't affect our budgets at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So it's definitely something. Judy Wilson is the main point of contact for the Office of Facility, Property, and Safety Management. She did provide a session in PIA a few days ago, 2 weeks ago. You can send her an email, and it can be prorated. So if you send in a tribal resolution, there's a package you submit. It's from your initial query that you want to start a 105 lease. So basically we have 2 months this year left. If you put in a tribal resolution today, they would prorate it and you can get the 2 months worth of this year yet in the 105 lease program. My understanding of the program, it's once you establish and get the lease, it's little bit of legwork on the front side. But once you have established all the submittals are in there and nothing's changed, then it's just negotiating the costs. For inflation, whatever. It can either be by square footage and an assessment on how much the general lease per square foot goes for, or you can do it based on actual costs, for electricity, for maintenance, roof. Say a roof's got a 20-year life, you amortize it and you get 1/20th of that funding each year that you can put in an account and save it till that roof needs replaced and that funding's covered. I feel that this program is a great opportunity for tribes and can take a huge burden off of their shoulders with some of the finances as far as the facilities. It's something that I think nationally, that I think the Midwest region, if the tribes get onto it early, it's a good thing.
I want to add to that. The tribe, they're entitled to this, and that is included in the Indian self-determination regulations. That's where the tribe has the entitlement for the 105L leases. And that information, I guess we just speak and call it 105 lease, but it's a facility lease between BIA and the tribe to compensate the tribe for the facility that it uses to carry out a program, function, service, or activity under self-determination. So our involvement here at the region and agency is verification of the programs that are contracted or compacted under a 638 contract. We're not actually involved in the direct negotiation of that. Again, that's Judy Wilson's office from the Office of Facilities. And but after that negotiation is completed, we will then modify, and the lease language will be included in your contract. And once the amount of the compensation is determined, those funds will be provided back to the tribe through your respective self-determination contract. So all of this 105 lease, although it's dealing with another office per se, that's the negotiation part and determining the amount of the compensation. But again, then those funds flow back through self-determination and would be included in your contractor compact.
And very similar with self-governance, it would be included in your self-governance agreement. And it is negotiated every year. And renewable. Any questions out there?
No questions.
Gotta be something. Is there any or ideas or suggestions for this budget 2-1? Like I said, this was a Partners in Action session last year, 101 comment, and they wanted us to expand on it. When I received this, I said, "Ooh, this is a lot of Michelle." So I talked to Michelle and we said we'd take team and work on this together. So is there anything that people would like to see in this type of session? Or should we just identify it as a contracting session and provide that information? Everybody's still on their first cup of coffee this morning. And I don't see Annette on yet. So her appointment must have taken a little bit longer. Oh, I do have a question. Go ahead, Michael.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm still finishing my first cup of coffee. Is for Partners in Action, is there sessions for the consolidated tribal government programs? They have their own,
Go ahead,
or
Michelle.
is that something we could fit into this a little bit? I know we talked, you discussed TPA, but you know,
So
the nature of a CTGP budget, it took me years in my career to understand that and allocate it. And
So under CTGP, so that's not a separate program per se, but a grouping of various programs, and it goes under, so where we indicated, where we showed the example of the accounting information and it had the program code. And I specifically, I had used the T193030, which was CTGP. So that's a combination of various codes. Some tribes still do have a separate program for each program. So they may have a JOM program, they may have a social services program, Indian child welfare, natural resources, which is fine. Again, it's tribal decision, self-determination. Some tribes, however, have decided that they will group their like type programs and they move it into one accounting. On our side, it's into one accounting code, this T1913030, Consolidated Tribal Governments. So the tribe then has the benefits for the tribe then are that the tribe can rebudget and move the funds from one program to another without having to go through a formal reprogramming on the BIA side and actually submitting a tribal resolution, and we have to go send it up to central office and they have to move the funds from one code to another code. On the tribal side, having those funds in a CTGP, so if you have various programs under that one category, CTGP, you still need to be providing a breakout of the budget. So if you have 5 different programs, JOM, social services, tribal court, natural resources, and let's say Indian child welfare, that combined total under CTGP, you would still have 5 separate breakouts, for each of those individual programs. Does that answer your question, Michael, or do you want to expand or discuss that further?
No, thank you. Yeah, that does.
Jody, is there anything you want to add to that as well?
No, I think that about covers it. It's, I think as you always kind of pointed out, it's not a specific program onto itself where people kind of look at CTGP like, oh, we don't run the CTGP program. What you do run are programs that could be lumped together under CTGP. So it's not a separate program. I guess that's kind of just something to keep in mind about it.
Any other questions out there?
Nope, no other questions so far.
There's a lot of good people out there, must have something they want to ask. Because here's the time and place to do it. You've got Michelle and Jody, 2 contract officers, and budget, we got you covered. And that apparently didn't make it out of her meeting or appointment. All right, so again, Michelle, do you think we should close it down then?
I think so. If we don't have any other further questions or, and you can certainly send us an email, give us a call if you come across any questions or, you know, we're happy to, assist you. So if you don't want to ask here, that's fine.
So I did provide, before we started this, I provided the link to the Green Books. That's a great wealth of knowledge. If there's a program you're thinking about operating, you can look it up in the Green Book and find out some information about the program. And then I did provide my email there if you have any questions for budgets. Yes, and we knew Annette had another commitment, so we were just hoping that it would all work out and we could get this in there because we definitely wanted the tribal input for everybody. Because a lot of times that puts a common sense spin on it. You know, we have regulations we follow, so. I thank everybody for their time and I appreciate it, and by all means, at the end of the course, you get evaluation, fill those out, and we will look at them, and if there's information we have to do to expand on this, make it better, we will. All right, I thank you, and we'll give you the rest of your day back.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Have a good day. See, there was a question if the presentation can be emailed. All presentations in the recording, Eric will be stopping the recording shortly, but they'll be made available, and I can put the slideshow in the file or in the chat for this.